The text came early in the morning, right as the sun was pushing through the curtains. Evan's phone buzzed once, a short vibration that pulled him from his half-sleep. He reached for it, expecting another work notification or one of those automated reminders about bills. But the moment he read the message, his heart went still. "You're banned from Thanksgiving, idiot." His mother's name sat right above the words, glowing on the screen like a slap. For a long moment, he just stared. The words didn't even make sense at first. Thanksgiving? Banned? It wasn't a joke. His mother never joked. She was always sharp, always right, always the one who spoke last. The insult at the end, idiot, hit harder than anything else. It wasn't new, but seeing it written out made it feel final, like a line being drawn in their relationship. Evan sat up, rubbed his face, and reread the message. His chest felt tight, not from anger at first, but confusion. What had he done this time? He scrolled up through their messages, looking for a reason, but their last conversation had been normal, or at least, their version of normal. She had asked him to help pay the water bill again because the online system was confusing. He had agreed, like always. That was 3 days ago, nothing since then. And now, this. For years, he'd been the one keeping her life running. Every month, he quietly paid her overdue bills. When her car broke down, he paid for repairs. When her house needed painting, he hired someone. When she complained about her health, he sent her money for checkups she rarely went to. His sister Julia called him Mom's favorite, but she never saw how one-sided it all was. It wasn't love. It was obligation dressed up as loyalty. He threw his phone on the couch and got up. The apartment was silent, too clean, too empty. He made coffee, trying to shake off the weight in his chest, but the words kept replaying. Banned from Thanksgiving. It wasn't just a holiday. It was tradition. Every year, no matter what, he went home, cooked the turkey because his mom hated doing it, and tried to keep the peace between his siblings. It was always chaotic, but he showed up anyway. He thought that meant something. He sat back down and opened his messages again. The 3 little dots appeared for a moment. She was typing, then vanished. She'd stopped herself. That was her way of twisting the knife. Send a cruel message, then vanish into silence. Let him chase the reason. He didn't. Not this time. Evan's memories began to pull him backward, through years of being the good son. He remembered being 12, bringing home a report card full of A's and her saying, "You think you're better than everyone now?" He remembered the time he got his first job out of college and she told him, "Don't forget who raised you." Every success he had came with a reminder. He owed her everything. He'd believed it for too long. Last Thanksgiving had been the breaking point. He and his fiancée Rachel had come to dinner. He was nervous because his mother could be unpredictable. Things started fine. Laughter, stories, even a compliment about Rachel's dress. Then, out of nowhere, his mother asked in front of everyone, "So, Rachel, how much money do you plan to spend before the wedding?" Evan's generous, but his wallet's not bottomless. The room went silent. Rachel had gone red. Evan had calmly told his mother to stop. She'd smiled, raised her glass, and said, "Just being honest." He remembered the way his mother's expression changed after dinner. The way she'd whispered, "Don't embarrass me in my house again." The next day, his sister called, saying Mom was hurt and that he should apologize. He hadn't. That was the first time he'd ever told her no. And now, this text felt like payback. Evan stood up and paced the room. His mind raced with a mix of anger and clarity. He realized how much control she still had over him, not just emotionally, but financially. Every automatic payment he'd set up, every favor he'd agreed to, tied him to her like a leash. It wasn't just money, it was guilt. Every time she said, "You're the only one who helps me," it made him feel like he couldn't stop. He thought helping her made him a good son, but it only made him a servant to her pride. He picked up his phone again, his thumb hovering over the screen. He could have replied, demanded an explanation, fought back, written a paragraph full of anger. But instead, something inside him shifted, a strange calm, a quiet that came not from peace but from exhaustion. He opened his banking app. He scrolled through the list of payments: electric, water, credit card, house insurance. His name was everywhere. Her bills weren't hers. They were his. His mother had turned him into her safety net, and now she'd cut him out of her life with one message. He took a deep breath and started removing each payment, one by one. No anger, no hesitation, just quiet clicks. For the first time in years, he felt like he was taking his life back. Then he turned his phone over, face down on the table. He didn't want to see her call. He knew she would eventually, once the unpaid bills started piling up. But for now, he needed silence. As the day passed, he tried to focus on work, but his mind kept circling back to her. He wasn't sure if he'd done the right thing. Was it revenge, or was it just self-defense after years of being used? He didn't know. But one thing was certain. Something inside him had finally broken free. That night, he sat by the window, watching the lights flicker across the city. He thought about all the times he'd covered for her, made excuses for her, told himself she loved him in her own way. Maybe she did, but love wasn't supposed to feel like this, like debt, like duty. He thought about Thanksgiving, about the table that would be full of laughter and stories that painted him as the ungrateful son. Maybe his chair would stay empty. Maybe she'd even enjoy that at first. But deep down, he knew she thrived on control, not absence. And for the first time, he wasn't under her control anymore. The silence around him grew heavy but peaceful. There were no buzzing notifications, no guilt-laced phone calls, no one telling him what he owed. It was strange, quiet, lonely even, but honest. He thought about replying just once, maybe to say, "I'm done," but he didn't need to. The silence would speak louder. When he finally went to bed, he looked at his phone one more time. The message was still there, glowing faintly on the screen. "You're banned from Thanksgiving, idiot." He almost smiled. If being banned meant being free, maybe it wasn't such a bad thing after all. Outside, the city buzzed with life. Inside, for the first time in a long time, Evan felt still. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. Maybe guilt, maybe regret. But tonight, there was peace in the quiet. And somewhere in that stillness, he realized something he'd never allowed himself to believe before. He didn't need her approval anymore. The text had felt like a wound, but now it felt like closure, and as he drifted to sleep, he knew deep down this wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of his freedom. Evan woke up the next morning with a strange calm. The anger from the night before had cooled, but what replaced it wasn't peace. It was clarity. He sat at the kitchen table, sipping cold coffee, his laptop open to his banking page. Rows of automatic payments filled the screen: electric, gas, water, mortgage, even her streaming services. His name was everywhere. His entire adult life had been tangled up in her finances, and now, with a few clicks, he could cut every string. He hovered over the cancel button for the first bill, hesitated for a heartbeat, then pressed it. The confirmation popped up. Payment stopped. He felt a flicker of guilt but pushed it down. One by one, he canceled them all, each click feeling lighter than the last. The silence in the room grew heavier with every confirmation email that appeared in his inbox. He wasn't angry anymore, just done. By noon, it was finished. Years of quiet servitude erased in less than an hour. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling, a strange emptiness filling his chest. This wasn't the kind of victory that made you smile. It was quiet, heavy, and real. He'd finally drawn a line. The first day, nothing happened. No messages, no calls. His phone sat still on the counter. By the second day, a few texts came in from his sister. Mom said the power company messed up. "Did you change something on her account?" He ignored them. On the third day, the calls began. At first, it was just one missed call, his mother. Then another. Then 5 in an hour. By nightfall, there were dozens. He turned his phone face down, but the vibrations kept coming. The buzzing felt like a heartbeat, constant and urgent. 87 missed calls by morning. He didn't answer a single one. He could almost picture her reaction, confused, then angry, then desperate. She'd blame him, of course. He was always the easy one to guilt. She'd call relatives, spin a story about how he abandoned her. He knew how she worked, twisting the truth until she was the victim and he was the cold-hearted son. But this time, he didn't care about her version. He went through the day in silence, the calls still coming. His sister finally sent a message that said, "Mom's power got cut off. She's sitting in the dark. You've gone too far." He stared at the message for a long time. The words "too far" echoed in his mind. For years, she'd gone too far, calling him names, controlling him through guilt, making him feel like love was something he had to earn. Now that he'd finally stopped, suddenly he was the one who'd crossed the line. Still, the image of her sitting alone in the dark wouldn't leave his head. He felt that familiar pull of guilt again, the instinct to fix things. But he reminded himself, this wasn't about revenge. It was about balance. She had built a system where he carried all the weight, and she had none. Now the balance had shifted. That night, as he lay in bed, memories kept flashing. His mother yelling when he forgot to send money one month. The way she'd cry about bills he hadn't even caused. The way she made him feel like he owed her for existing. He realized how deep her control ran. Even now, after cutting her off, she still lived in his head, guiding his thoughts. The next morning, he decided to take back his mind too. He muted her number, turned off notifications, and went for a long drive. The air felt lighter, the road stretching wide and empty ahead. He didn't have a destination, just movement. He needed distance, not miles, but emotional space. Still, as the miles rolled by, his thoughts returned to her. Maybe she was scared. Maybe she really didn't know how to handle things without him. Part of him wanted to drive straight to her house, fix everything and end the chaos. But another part of him, the part that had been quiet for too long, told him to keep going. She needed to see what life was like without control, and he needed to see what life was like without being controlled. By evening, he stopped at a diner outside the city. He ordered coffee and watched families talk and laugh at nearby tables. The simple warmth between them made him ache. He couldn't remember the last time his family had sat together without tension. Every gathering felt like walking on glass. Every word measured, every smile forced. Love in his family came with strings, and he was tired of being tangled in them. When he got home, his phone had stopped buzzing. No calls, no texts. The silence was unsettling but also peaceful. He knew the storm wasn't over. It was just the quiet before it hit again. 2 days later, it did. His uncle called first, pretending to check in but quickly turning to guilt. "Evan, your mom's worried sick. She said you're punishing her. You can't do that to family." Evan kept his voice calm. "I'm not punishing her. I'm just done paying her bills," his uncle sighed. "You know how she is. She needs help." Evan replied quietly, "I've been helping her my whole life." Then he hung up. He sat in silence afterward, his hands shaking slightly. Standing up to her had always been impossible, even through other people. But now, each conversation, each decision made him stronger. A week passed. He started sleeping better. He began cooking for himself, exercising, focusing on things he'd neglected for years. The more distance he created, the clearer everything became. He realized how much of his identity had been built around being the rescuer. Without that role, he was finally learning who he was. One evening, he got home to find a small envelope under his door. His heart jumped when he saw his mother's handwriting. Inside was a note, short, shaky, and full of guilt. "I can't believe you'd do this to me. After everything I've done for you, I don't have power, Evan. I can't even cook. I hope you're proud." There was no apology, no understanding, just manipulation wrapped in self-pity. He folded the note carefully and threw it away. The guilt that usually followed didn't come this time. Instead, there was a quiet sadness. He realized she wasn't trying to fix their relationship. She was trying to regain control. That night, he looked out his window at the city lights and thought about how strange freedom felt. It wasn't joyful, it was lonely. But loneliness, he realized, was better than emotional chains. For the first time, he wasn't living in reaction to someone else's moods. He was living for himself. Days passed. The missed calls stopped completely. The silence stretched, heavy but calm. His sister texted occasionally, trying to play peacemaker, but he only answered with short replies. He wasn't ready to go back, not yet. Maybe not ever. As the end of the month approached, he saw the news. Early snow was expected that Thanksgiving. He wondered if his mother had enough heat, enough food. For a moment he almost sent her money again. But then he remembered her last message. "You're banned from Thanksgiving." The words had been cruel, final, and meant to hurt. He turned off his phone and went to bed. For the first time in his life, Evan understood what boundaries felt like. They weren't walls to shut people out. They were doors that could stay open only if both sides respected them. His mother never had, but he finally did. The next morning, as he made coffee and looked out the window, he felt something new. Not pride, not relief, but peace. He had chosen himself, not out of hate, but out of self-respect. The revenge had never been about hurting her. It had been about saving himself, and for the first time in years, that was enough. A week before Thanksgiving, Evan found himself driving down a road he'd promised not to take again. The trees on both sides were bare, their branches sharp against the gray sky. The radio was on low, but he wasn't really listening. His mind was somewhere else, back at that text message, back at his mother's silence. He hadn't planned to go near her house, but something inside him wanted to see for himself what had happened since he cut her off. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the last bit of hope that things could change. When he turned onto her street, everything looked the same at first. The familiar mailbox, the cracked driveway. But the house itself looked different. It seemed smaller, dimmer. The curtains were half drawn, and no smoke came from the chimney. For years, he'd paid for the heat to stay on through winter. Now, it was cold, and he could almost feel the chill from inside just by looking at it. He parked across the street and stayed in the car. He didn't know what he wanted to see. Maybe proof that she was okay, or maybe proof that she finally understood what she'd done. Through the front window, he saw her sitting at the kitchen table. She was bundled in a thick sweater, her hair unkempt, staring at her phone. Her face was tired, older than he remembered. The sight sent a strange ache through him. This was the woman who had ruled his life with words sharper than knives, and now she looked fragile. For a few seconds, his hand went to the door handle. He almost got out. He almost walked up the driveway, knocked, and said, "Let's stop this." But then, a memory flashed, her voice yelling at him the night he'd defended Rachel, the way she'd looked at him like a stranger, her text calling him an idiot. That moment had burned away every ounce of trust. He couldn't just step back into that pain, so he stayed in the car, watching quietly. She picked up her phone, stared at the screen, then put it down again. Probably his number, he thought. She wouldn't call, though, not now. Her pride wouldn't let her. That pride had cost both of them more than money. It had cost years of love, trust, and peace. The wind picked up, brushing dead leaves across the windshield. He felt something shift inside him, not anger, not pity, but acceptance. She wasn't going to change. She didn't know how, and if he kept waiting for her to, he'd never move forward. He started the car and drove off, the house growing smaller in the mirror until it disappeared. That night, when he got home, the silence didn't feel so heavy anymore. It was almost comforting. He cooked himself dinner, ate in peace, and even laughed at a show for the first time in months. There was no guilt, no tension, just stillness. But deep down, a small part of him still wondered what she was thinking. Was she angry? Sad? Did she finally realize how much he'd done for her? He'd probably never know. Thanksgiving came quickly. The city was covered in light snow, and most people were rushing around with grocery bags and holiday plans. Evan had taken the day off work, not to celebrate, but to rest. He made a small meal for himself. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, nothing fancy. It was quiet, but it was his. He thought about how, for the first time, he wasn't expected to fix anything or please anyone. He didn't have to walk into a room pretending everything was fine. He could just exist. That realization brought a kind of peace he hadn't felt since childhood. In the afternoon, his phone buzzed. He looked down and froze. It was his sister, Julia. "Mom wants to talk to you. She says she's sorry. Can you call her?" His heart skipped. He read the message again and again. Sorry. The word looked strange coming from his family. He didn't know if it was real or just another trick to pull him back in. But after all this time, hearing that word, even secondhand, made something inside him soften. He stared at the phone for a long moment. Then he put it down, not out of anger but out of exhaustion. He couldn't go back just because she said sorry through someone else. Words weren't enough, not anymore. That night he went for a walk. The air was crisp, the streets quiet. Every house he passed glowed with laughter, lights, and the smell of food. He felt a pang of loneliness but also freedom. Maybe family wasn't supposed to hurt this much. Maybe love wasn't supposed to feel like debt. He thought about Rachel, how she had once told him, "You can't keep fixing people who don't want to be fixed." He hadn't listened then. But now he understood. As he walked, snow began to fall, soft, slow flakes drifting through the streetlights. For the first time in a long while, he felt peace without permission. He smiled faintly and kept walking. Later that week, an envelope arrived in his mailbox. The handwriting was his mother's again. He hesitated before opening it. Inside there was a short note. "You've made your point. I hope you're happy. I'll figure things out on my own." No apology. No warmth, just pride and cold words. Evan let out a slow breath and folded the letter carefully. This time he didn't throw it away. He put it in a drawer, a reminder, not of pain, but of why he'd chosen to walk away. Days turned into weeks. The missed calls stopped completely. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like recovery. He began spending more time with friends, working on hobbies, rebuilding his life in small ways. Every now and then, his thoughts drifted back to her, but not with anger. Just a quiet understanding. One evening, months later, his sister called again. Her voice was calm this time. "Mom's doing okay," she said. "She got help with the bills. She's been quieter, different." Evan nodded silently. He didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. Change, if it ever came, had to come from her, not from him. When they hung up, he sat by the window, watching the city lights flicker. He felt no need for revenge, no satisfaction in her struggle, just relief that he was finally free of it. He thought back to the day he got that message. "You're banned from Thanksgiving, idiot." Back then, it had felt like an ending. Now he realized it had been a beginning. The moment he stopped trying to earn love from someone who only knew control, his real life had started. Evan picked up his phone and scrolled through old photos. There was one from years ago, him and his mom at the fair, smiling. For a second, he almost didn't recognize himself. The younger version of him looked lighter, unburdened. He wished he could tell that kid what he knew now. That love without respect isn't love at all. As the night deepened, he turned off the lights and stood by the window. The snow had started again, covering the streets in white. Somewhere out there, his mother was probably sitting in her own silence, maybe reflecting, maybe not. Either way, he no longer carried her chaos inside him. The next morning, he opened a new account, one meant for his future. No shared bills, no obligations, no strings, just him moving forward. He took a deep breath and smiled. It wasn't joy or triumph. It was peace, the kind that comes when you stop fighting to be understood and start living to be free. He knew there might always be a small part of him that missed her, that longed for the love he'd never fully received. But he also knew that missing someone didn't mean you had to go back to them. Sometimes love means letting go, even when it hurts. And as the morning sun broke through the clouds, lighting up his apartment, Evan whispered to himself, "I'm okay now." Because for the first time in his life, he truly was.